I'm very good at minding my own business. And the trick to minding your own business is knowing what is your business.
They say the best way to stay safe in Hollywood is to mind your own business. But Dave Chappelle? He's never been good at following orders. Right now, the entire entertainment industry is trembling because the man who famously walked away from $50 million just broke his silence on the one name nobody dared to touch: Oprah Winfrey. As the Epstein files continue to flood the internet, a chilling pattern is emerging, one that suggests the Queen of Media wasn't just a spectator.
Look, Mariah Carey made a $100 million deal, and 3 months later, she's all of a sudden mysteriously crazy. He's waving a gun on the street screaming, "They're trying to kill me."
But a vital gear in a system designed to control, recruit, and silence. We're talking about millions of documents that are turning conspiracy theories into a terrifying reality. From the way she tried to gaslight Chappelle on national television to the brutal public blacklisting of Monique, the dots are finally being connected. Dave Chappelle isn't just a comedian anymore. He's a whistleblower pointing at an infrastructure of power that Mel Gibson and Corey Feldman tried to warn us about decades ago. The handlers, the recruiters, the deal-makers, they're all finally coming into the light. Today, we're peeling back the curtain on the evidence that suggests Oprah Winfrey was the ultimate Hollywood handler. This isn't just gossip, it's pattern recognition, and the picture it paints is absolutely sickening. In the glitzy, high-stakes world of Hollywood, there is a word that carries more weight than producer or director. It's a word spoken in hushed tones behind closed doors: the handler. A handler isn't just a manager or a PR agent. A handler is a gatekeeper. They are the ones tasked with keeping the talent in line, ensuring the narrative stays scripted, and, most importantly, neutralizing anyone who dares to look behind the velvet curtain. For decades, Oprah Winfrey has been the golden standard of American media, the ultimate empathetic ear. But Dave Chappelle, a man who has looked into the abyss of the industry and walked away with his soul intact, is telling a very different story. He's pointing to a pattern that suggests Oprah isn't just a mogul. She's the ultimate handler for a system that thrives on exploitation. To understand why Dave Chappelle is making these accusations now, we have to go back to 2006. This was the moment the entire industry shook. Dave had just walked away from a $50 million contract with Comedy Central. He fled to Africa, leaving the world wondering if he had truly lost his mind. When he returned, he sat across from Oprah Winfrey. It was supposed to be a moment of healing, a chance for Dave to explain his breakdown. But if you watch that footage today through the lens of the newly leaked Epstein files and the whispers of Hollywood's dark underbelly, it looks less like an interview and more like an interrogation. Dave wasn't crazy. He was exhausted. He was telling Oprah, point blank, about the sick environment of Hollywood. He talked about the invisible interests that try to control a black man's image and career. And how did Oprah respond? She didn't offer empathy. She didn't ask about the systemic corruption he was hinting at. Instead, she immediately pivoted to a script we've seen used 1,000 times to discredit whistleblowers. She compared him to Mariah Carey. She brought up rumors of him being unstable. She used her massive platform to frame Dave's moral stand as a mental health crisis. That is the hallmark of a handler. When the truth gets too close to the bone, you don't argue with the truth. You destroy the credibility of the person telling it. Dave Chappelle has often said that nothing feels better to a coward than to watch a brave guy fall. He was talking about the way the industry delights in the destruction of anyone who refuses to be owned. And for years, Oprah has been the face of that industry. Think about the infrastructure required to keep a system like Jeffrey Epstein's running for decades. It didn't just need a predator, it needed a shield. It needed people with enough cultural capital to silence victims and make the troublemakers disappear. It required a network of scouts and recruiters who could identify vulnerable talent and bring them into the fold. When Dave Chappelle speaks about Oprah today, he's highlighting a sickening pattern of pattern recognition. He's looking at who she protected and who she chose to destroy. Look at the case of Monique. In 2009, Monique was at the top of the world. She had just starred in Precious, a film Oprah Winfrey herself had championed. But when Monique refused to do unpaid promotional work, stating that her time with her family was more valuable than the industry's free labor demands, the machine turned on her. Oprah didn't just let it go. She and the powers that be blacklisted Monique. They branded her difficult. They told every studio in town that she was a liability. But the punishment went deeper than just her career. In one of the most vicious displays of media power ever recorded, Oprah invited Monique's estranged brother, Gerald, onto her show. This was the same man Monique had publicly accused of sexually abusing her when she was a child. Monique begged Oprah not to do it. She told her that bringing her abuser and her enabling parents onto national television would shatter her healing process. Oprah did it anyway. She gave a platform to an abuser to share his side, effectively gaslighting a survivor in front of millions. This is what a handler does. It's a message sent to everyone else in the industry. If you don't play ball, I will find the most painful private trauma in your life, and I will weaponize it against you on a global stage. Monique's career never recovered. She was made an example of. And Dave Chappelle was watching. He saw how the queen of media could flip from a sisterly figure to a cold-blooded executioner the moment her authority was questioned. We have to ask the question, why was Oprah so quick to destroy a woman like Monique over a contract dispute, yet so slow to see the predators standing right next to her? For years, she was best friends with Harvey Weinstein. She sat in the front row of his shows, she championed his projects, and she helped maintain his image as a Hollywood visionary while he was allegedly raping women in hotel rooms just floors away. When the #MeToo movement finally broke the dam, Oprah tried to position herself as a leader of the cause. But voices like Rose McGowan and Seal weren't buying it. They pointed out the obvious. You don't get to be that powerful in Hollywood without knowing exactly how the meat is made. The Epstein files, which contain over 3 million documents, are now revealing that this wasn't just about a few bad apples. It was an integrated system, a system of handlers who managed the flow of people and information. Dave Chappelle's prophetic warnings from 2006 are now being backed up by cold, hard evidence. We are seeing emails, flight logs, and witness testimonies that describe an infrastructure of recruitment. They needed people who could provide access to young, hopeful, and vulnerable individuals. They needed scouts who could find the next big thing in poor countries or struggling neighborhoods and bring them into the elite circles. When you look at Oprah's career through this lens, the philanthropy starts to look like something else entirely. She opened a school for girls in South Africa, vulnerable children in a poor country, promised a life of opportunity. Within years, a staff member was arrested for sexually assaulting those very students. It's the exact model described in the Epstein files, the promise of a better life used as a lure. And just like the John of God scandal, where Oprah promoted a man who was later revealed to be running a literal baby trafficking farm, the response is always the same. Scrub the tapes, delete the interviews, memory hole the connection. But Dave Chappelle isn't letting us forget. He's telling us that the crazy people were actually the only ones seeing clearly. Corey Feldman tried to give the police names in 1993, and they did nothing because the names were too big. Mel Gibson tried to warn us in 1998 about the horror movie town he lived in, and they labeled him a lunatic. Dave Chappelle walked away from $50 million to keep his sanity, and they tried to call him a crackhead. What we're seeing now is the collapse of the illusion. The handlers are losing their grip on the narrative. The Epstein files aren't just about one man on a private island. They are a map of the Hollywood machine. And according to Dave Chappelle, Oprah Winfrey's name is written all over the blueprints. She wasn't just a guest at the party. She was the one holding the guest list, deciding who was in and who was destroyed. As the truth continues to leak, the question isn't if the system will fall. It's who will be left standing when the dust finally settles. The deeper you dig into the Epstein files, the more you realize that the horror wasn't just about what happened on a private island in the Caribbean. It was about the logistics, To run an operation of that magnitude for decades, you need more than just money. You need a global infrastructure. You need scouts in foreign countries. You need facilitators who can bypass borders. And most importantly, you need gatekeepers who provide a shiny humanitarian front for the world to see. This is where Dave Chappelle's accusations against Oprah Winfrey shift from Hollywood gossip into something much more sinister. Chappelle has spent years hinting at the rituals and the sick deals made in the shadows. But the data pouring out of the newly released documents is starting to mirror the very platforms Oprah built her empire on. Let's look at the case of John of God. For years, João Teixeira de Faria, known globally as John of God, was the world's most famous spiritual healer. People traveled from every corner of the earth to his casa in Brazil, seeking miracles. And who gave him the ultimate seal of approval? Oprah Winfrey. In 2010, Oprah didn't just interview him. She traveled to Brazil, sat under a mango tree with him, and broadcasted his powers to millions of households. She called the experience profound. She gave a man, who spoke no English and operated in a remote part of a developing nation, the kind of global legitimacy that only she could provide. But in 2018, the mask fell off. John of God wasn't a healer. He was a monster. He was sentenced to over 60 years in prison after more than 300 women came forward with stories of sexual abuse. But it got even darker. Investigations revealed a literal baby farm operation. Reports surfaced that he kept women in captivity, impregnated them, and sold their babies, some allegedly for organ harvesting, others into trafficking rings. This was a massive, organized criminal enterprise operating in plain sight. And the moment the handcuffs clicked, what did Oprah do? She didn't lead the charge for justice. She didn't apologize to the victims she had unknowingly or knowingly sent into his arms. She scrubbed her website. She deleted the episodes. She tried to memory hole the fact that she was the one who mainstreamed a human trafficker. Dave Chappelle calls this pattern recognition. When you see it once, it's a tragedy. When you see it twice, it's a coincidence. But when you see it 3 times, it's a business model. Think about the Oprah Winfrey Leadership Academy for Girls in South Africa. On paper, it was a beautiful humanitarian project, a billionaire giving back to vulnerable young girls in a poor country. But look at the Epstein files. What was Jeffrey Epstein's primary method of operation? He targeted vulnerable girls in Eastern Europe and South Africa. He used the promise of scholarships, modeling contracts, and educational opportunities to lure them away from their families and into his web. He needed scouts. He needed a way to vet these girls. In 2007, just months after Oprah's school opened with a star-studded gala, the dream turned into a nightmare. A female dormitory matron was arrested and charged with 22 counts of assault and sexual molestation against the students. The girls claimed they were being groomed and abused within the very walls Oprah had built. Again, the pattern is identical. A powerful figure creates an environment with exclusive access to vulnerable children in a third-world country. When the abuse comes to light, the powerful figure expresses shock and heartbreak. Yet the infrastructure that allowed the predator access in the first place is never fully questioned. Dave Chappelle has been shouting from the rooftops about the scouts in Hollywood for 20 years. He told stories about the guy in the suit who offers you the world but wants your soul in return. He warned us that these people look for broken or needy individuals because they are easier to control. And when you look at the Epstein files, we see the exact same language. Epstein's emails didn't talk about victims. They talked about assets. They compared children to shrimp. Throw away the head, keep the body. This is the language of a butcher, not a businessman. And yet, this butcher was invited to the same parties, sat at the same tables, and shared the same inner circles as the most powerful woman in media. Mel Gibson tried to warn us about this recruitment culture back in the 90s. He talked about pedophile rings in Hollywood long before it was a hashtag. He described a town where the elite, viewed children as a commodity. They called him crazy. They said he was unstable and anti-Semitic to distract from the truth he was trying to expose. But then Mel produced Sound of Freedom. He put his own reputation on the line to show the world how these trafficking networks actually work. They use talent scouts. They use fake humanitarian missions. They use promoters to find the kids and handlers to keep the parents quiet. Now, look at the way Oprah handled Monique again. Why was it so important for Oprah to humiliate Monique on national television by bringing her abuser into the spotlight? It wasn't just about ratings. It was about silencing a whistleblower. Monique was someone who refused to follow the unwritten rules of the industry. She wouldn't do the unpaid labor. She wouldn't kiss the ring. And she was vocal about her past trauma. By bringing her abuser, Gerald, onto the show, Oprah was effectively saying, "I own your story. I can validate your abuser whenever I want. I can make your trauma a public spectacle if you don't stay in line." This is the handler behavior Chappelle is exposing. A handler's job is to ensure that no one ever feels safe enough to speak the full truth. If you speak up, they will find your Gerald. They will find your darkest secret and broadcast it to the world. They will make you look crazy like they did to Dave in 2006. They will make you look unemployable like they did to Monique. Or they will make you disappear from the public eye entirely. The Epstein files contain over 3 million documents, thousands of videos and photos that the mainstream media is still too terrified to describe. They contain evidence of dissolving organic matter, 330 gallons of sulfuric acid purchased by Epstein on the very day the FBI opened a case against him. You don't buy that much acid unless you have a lot of things to make disappear. And you don't operate with that kind of confidence unless you know that the handlers in the media will keep the cameras pointed the other way. Dave Chappelle isn't just a comedian telling jokes anymore. He is a man who saw the sulfuric acid. He saw the shrimp comments. He saw the way Oprah looked at him across that yellow chair and tried to paint him as a madman for refusing her system. He knows that the queen of media isn't the savior she pretends to be. She is the gatekeeper. She is the one who decides which predators get a platform and which victims get silenced. As the files continue to leak, the names are becoming impossible to ignore. The flight logs are being matched with the charity events. The humanitarian missions are being revealed as recruitment drives. And the woman who sat at the center of it all, smiling and handing out favorite things, is finally being asked the questions she spent 40 years avoiding. Why were your friends all predators? Why were your miracle healers all traffickers? Why were your schools full of abusers? Dave Chappelle warned us that the truth would shake the industry to its core. He told us that the handlers were the most dangerous people in the room. And as the Epstein files ripped the veil off Hollywood, it turns out Dave wasn't just telling jokes. He was reading the obituary of an entire system, and Oprah Winfrey's name is at the top of the list. When you look at the landscape of Hollywood today, it's like walking through a graveyard of reputations. But for years, we were told that the people buried there, the Mel Gibsons, the Corey Feldmans, the Moniques, were the ones who had lost it. We were told they were unstable, hateful, or simply difficult to work with. But Dave Chappelle is now showing us that these people weren't crazy. They were just the first ones to see the walls of the infrastructure closing in. The newly released Epstein files, with their 3 million documents and thousands of hours of footage, are actually acting as a Rosetta Stone for everything these whistleblowers have been screaming about since the 90s. And at the center of this deciphered code stands Oprah Winfrey, not as the victim of bad associations, but as the structural support for a system that required absolute silence. Let's talk about Mel Gibson. In 1998, Mel gave an interview that sounded like a fever dream at the time. He talked about weird paranoid suspicions and a horror movie atmosphere in the industry. He said he walked into rooms where he realized everyone knew a terrible secret, except for him. When Mel started asking the wrong questions, the machine did what it does best. It didn't just fire him, it dismantled him. They used his personal struggles and his outbursts to paint a picture of a man who had completely unraveled. They made him a pariah. But look at what Mel did next. He funded the Passion of the Christ with his own money because no studio would touch a man who wouldn't play by their rules. And then, he produced Sound of Freedom. For years, Sound of Freedom was suppressed. It sat on a shelf while studios refused to distribute it. Why? Because it exposed the exact model of trafficking that the Epstein files are now confirming. It showed the world how scouts use the promise of stardom to lure children from poor countries. It showed the handlers who facilitate the movement of these victims. Mel Gibson wasn't just making a movie. He was filing a report. And now that the Epstein files have dropped, the world is realizing that Mel wasn't the villain. He was the one trying to pull the fire alarm while Oprah and her elite circle were busy hosting the party. Then there is Corey Feldman. In 1993, Corey sat in a police station in Santa Barbara and gave them names. He gave them the names of the predators, the recruiters, and the people in power who were enabling the abuse of child actors. And what happened? Nothing. The police did nothing. The industry did nothing. Instead, Corey was mocked. He was treated like a punchline for 3 decades. But Dave Chappelle is pointing out the pattern here. Corey's names were too big. They were the untouchables. They were the people who showed up in the same flight logs and at the same private island retreats that are now being exposed to the light of day. When Chappelle says he sat there and gave them the names, he is honoring a legacy of truth-tellers who were crushed by the weight of Oprah's Hollywood. The Epstein files contain details that are so dark, they almost defy belief. We're talking about videos of girls being chased through properties like prey. We're talking about the purchase of 330 gallons of sulfuric acid, a chemical used to dissolve organic matter until nothing but a memory remains. This isn't the work of one lone wolf billionaire. This is an industrial-scale operation. You don't buy that much acid unless you have an infrastructure that guarantees no one will ever check your basement. And who provided that sense of security? Who were the people making sure the public kept looking at the humanitarian work while the shrimp were being traded in the back rooms? Dave Chappelle has often spoken about the rituals of Hollywood. He talked about the time he was told to wear a dress and how he refused because he knew it was a test of submission. He saw how the industry tries to break a man's spirit to make him more manageable. This is what a handler does. They manage the talent. They ensure that even the biggest stars in the world know that their power is lent to them, and it can be taken back at any second. Oprah Winfrey is the queen of this lent power. She is the one who can make you a billionaire overnight, or she can bring your abuser onto her show and destroy your sanity by the next morning. Look at the people Oprah surrounded herself with. She wasn't just acquaintances with Harvey Weinstein. She was his protector in the court of public opinion. She sat with Russell Simmons while the whispers of his crimes were already becoming a roar. She promoted John of God to the world while he was allegedly running a baby trafficking farm. Dave Chappelle is asking us to stop looking at these as mistakes. A woman as powerful, as researched, and as connected as Oprah Winfrey doesn't make the same mistake for 40 years. She facilitates, she platforms, she handles. When Chappelle walked away from that $50 million in 2005, he was escaping the machine. He saw that the price of the money was his soul, and he realized that the queen of media was the one holding the contract. When he sat across from her in 2006 and she tried to gaslight him, he saw the handler mask slip. He saw that she wasn't interested in his truth. She was interested in his compliance. She wanted him to admit he was crazy so the system could remain sane. But the Epstein files have changed everything. The prophetic warnings of Dave Chappelle are no longer just the musings of a comedian. They are the testimony of a survivor. The 3 million documents are confirming that the infrastructure Chappelle described is real. The scouts are real, the handlers are real, and the sulfuric acid is real. The pattern is absolutely sickening, and it leads directly back to the gatekeepers who kept the doors locked for decades. Ghislaine Maxwell is currently sitting in a luxury prison with a pet cat. This is the woman who was Epstein's right hand, the one who recruited the girls, the one who managed the logistics. Why is she being treated with kid gloves while the victims are still struggling to be heard? Because she knows where the bodies are. She knows which handlers in Hollywood were on the other end of those phone calls. And Dave Chappelle is telling us that we don't need a court case to see the truth. We just need to look at who is trending for the wrong reasons. Oprah Winfrey built an empire on the idea of speaking your truth. But as Dave Chappelle, Monique, and Mel Gibson have shown us, that only applies if your truth doesn't threaten the machine. The moment you point at the recruiters, the moment you name the handlers, the moment you look behind the curtain of the all-girls school or the spiritual healer, the queen becomes the executioner. The industry is shaking because the brave guys didn't fall. Dave Chappelle didn't break. Mel Gibson didn't disappear. Corey Feldman didn't stop naming names. And now, with the Epstein files flooding the internet, the cowards are the ones who are terrified. The truth is coming out in waves, and no amount of favorite things or inspirational speeches can drown out the sound of the infrastructure collapsing. Oprah Winfrey was the face of the system, but Dave Chappelle is the one writing its final chapter. The question is no longer, what happened to Dave Chappelle? The question is, what has Oprah Winfrey been doing all this time? And thanks to the files, we finally have the answer. The truth isn't just a whisper in the shadows anymore. It's a roar that the queen of media can no longer ignore. Dave Chappelle took the hits, walked away from the millions, and risked his entire legacy just so we could finally see the patterns hiding in plain sight. From the suppressed warnings of Mel Gibson to the ignored cries of Corey Feldman, the evidence is no longer a conspiracy. It's a documented reality. The Epstein files have pulled back the curtain on a system of handlers, recruiters, and gatekeepers who thought they were untouchable. But as Dave showed us, no amount of power can survive the light of the truth once the people stop being afraid. The machine only works if we stay silent and keep playing our part in their scripted reality. We want to hear from you. Is the pattern finally clear? Or is this just the tip of the iceberg? Drop a comment below and let us know if you think the queen is finally losing her crown. If you're tired of the gatekeepers and ready for the unfiltered truth, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications. The files are still dropping, the names are still being matched, and we aren't stopping until the full picture is exposed. Don't let the handlers control the narrative. Stay woke, stay sharp, and keep questioning everything. We'll see you in the next one.